that I wanted this opportunity is for us to have a conversation. You heard a message of yeshiva. When I became president, I said that the role of a university is to ennoble and enable. And my colleagues have worked to make it so. And if you listen to Rav Meir, you hear a vision that is incredibly attractive to young people. This is a generation that doesn't want to just schlep along. This is a generation that feels in a peculiar way more anonymous than its predecessors. They're living at a time where they have more access to information. The news cycle makes the whole world so present in their face. The mass communication and telecommunication and the blogs and the text messages and of course Facebook, where you have thousands of friends, all is right in young people's faces, and yet they feel powerless to affect anything that confronts them in their face. So this is a generation that is enormously hungry to have a name, to matter, to be able to matter. And sadly, in too many universities, because of the challenges of diversity, because of the pressures on pre-professional training, because of a certain academic aesthete that says what you really should be doing is learning to engage in critical thinking and somehow that's enough. There's been too much stepping on the name of God as we've walked across our libraries. And it's hard. And we think about what we need to be us. We're small people. We are a small portion of a small people, and yet we think we have an elite message that's necessary to keep illuminating the world and to give our children meaning. So when we talk about Yeshiva University and you go on the website and it says nowhere but here, it's because it's nowhere but here. So I also know that we've been in the news and the quasi-news and much sturm and drama about Yeshiva. If in fact you have children or grandchildren and they go to yeshiva, you get a different story. You get a story of joy. So I'll give you just a few little factoids I got this week that makes me feel worthwhile. If any of you were present a week ago Sunday, you could have joined with 1,500 Yeshiva University students from the undergraduate schools, the high schools, Cardozo, Einstein in the Celebrate Israel Parade, the largest delegation of any young people, by the way, the only university delegation, but the only delegation of Jewish young people, and it's 2 weeks after classes have ended. I think today, I think they've returned already, but last Thursday, the dean of our Center for the Jewish Future sent an email out to students saying they were very concerned about the plight of the citizens of Houston, Jewish and non-Jewish, and that there was a real need for volunteers to help with the cleanup, and asked if there'd be people who would be willing to spend several days in Houston. By Motzei Shabbos, we had over 100 volunteers, and we had to kind of prune it down to 20 because that's all we had funding for, and they've just spent a week in Houston, giving a lot to Houston, but I must tell you, getting more than they're giving, because they profoundly matter and they see how important it is to profoundly matter. The US News and World Report, which I never pay attention to because you can always parse it in different ways, came out with a report this week that I'm going to tell you because I like what it says. So it indicated that Yeshiva University is #1 in the state of New York and #2 in the nation among colleges with the highest percent of graduates pursuing advanced degrees. In other words, Yeshiva University has the highest number of its graduates that continue on to graduate and professional school. It's a remarkable figure. We've done some checking. It seems to be true. The other thing that's interesting to me is we had some other data from the class that just graduated. We're always concerned about law school and medical school. In terms of our medical school applicants, at Stern College, 23 women applied to medical school. At Stern College, 23 students were accepted at medical school. Find me how many other schools in the country can say that. At Yeshiva College, 29 students were accepted at medical school, 33 applied. Just show that gives us a net average of 93% and reminds all of us which the lesser sex is. At Yeshiva College in law, 17 students applied to law school, 17 students were accepted to law school. At Stern, 5 students applied to law school, 5 students were accepted to law school. In dental school, 10 students applied from Stern to dental school, 10 were accepted. 19 boys applied to dental school, 16 were accepted. Those are just figures, but they're figures where sometimes we just have to confront the reality that maybe you can have it all. Maybe you can be in an environment where quality matters. Maybe you can be in an environment where community matters. Maybe you can be in an environment where mattering matters. At the same time as you grow, as you have a network for your entire life, and you build a life, a valuable life of values. That's YU. But there's a lot that you've been hearing and talking about, and a lot of legitimate questions. And my greatest pleasure is for several minutes, if I make it safe for you, right? I am very invested in you knowing what there is to know about your institution. So I want to throw the floor open to questions, and there are no things as improper questions. First one, I hope you planted one or two. Nobody needs to know anything about Yeshiva University. That's wonderful. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us an overview about the financial past and future at YU and address some of the questions that have been out there in terms of outlook going forward?
Sure. Yeshiva University has always been a miraculous institution, and it has never been rolling in money. The first time that Yeshiva University met payroll was 1964. The first time it met a payroll. And thank God people have been generous. My predecessors have been visionary and relentless. And Yeshiva has moved forward in wonderful ways. Next Tuesday, I celebrate my 12th anniversary as president of Yeshiva University. That's 60 dog years. It's been a period of time where there has been, frankly, a remarkable renaissance of YU. The faculty is extraordinary. The Rosh Yeshiva are almost joyous. The students pack the base medrash. We have more undergraduate students now than we have at any time except 1 year at Yeshiva University. And all that is the good news. We have a wonderful faculty. They're not terribly happy with me. They're kind of frustrated because they haven't, oh, you're happy with me. Yeah, well, I won't disagree with you or you'll kill me. Professor Sober, that's it. No, they're not. They all like me very much, but you have to understand faculty. Nobody at Yeshiva University has received a raise in 5 out of the last 6 years because there's no money. And for faculty, it's a simple proposition. We'll do our work, you make sure we're taken care of. Our faculty, thank God, is nicely paid, but we're not used to working without salary increases, and we haven't gotten salary increases because there's no money. And there's no money because we needed to build something that was worthy of our children. We needed to build something that was excellent enough in terms of honors programs and academic programs and a base medrash and a Strauss Center. We needed to have a Gluck Center and to build the campus on both campuses so that they'd be wonderful. And we did that. And we're now confronting the benefits of 2008 when the economy crashed, and there were some other factors. People are frightened. People, and maybe I'm not terribly tolerant of it, but I should be. Jews don't want to pay tuition. They've been paying tuition since the year Gimel. They've been paying tuition for multiple children since their children are 3 years old. College comes along, and I think it's the first chance that maybe they can escape that. And it's very understandable. But you also have to know that this is the most important years in the development of our children as people, as citizens, and as Jews. And there is no other place that can provide students with that kind of enrichment but yeshiva. There are a lot of, I spent 15 years of my life before these 12 running the Hillel Foundation. It was very important for me. But I was working for the other 90% of the Jews who were not Orthodox, trying to connect them with their identity. And for the Orthodox students, I wanted to make sure that there were 15 places where somebody could have a worthwhile Jewish existence and not find it impossible to live. But I also tell people that nobody goes to Hillel University. Right? You all go to a secular university. And those secular universities are very welcoming, and we're not even going to talk about Israel. But they represent a different culture. They represent a Greek culture with no modifications. They represent a culture of rampant individualism as opposed to a community. They represent casual intimacy. instead of meaningful relationships. And this is not, I'm doing generalizations here, so please know that. They also represent a very strong sense of anti-orthodoxy, not Orthodox Judaism, anti-orthodoxy. So when somebody tells me that the Friday night at Maryland is great to be a Jew, I say, that's great. How's Wednesday? How's Wednesday? When I was at Hillel, and people would ask me that my son's been admitted to Penn and to Yeshiva universities when I was at Hillel, which school should they go to? And I thought a lot about that answer, and I have the same answer today that I did then, right? Which is to say that it's the wrong question. The right question is Yeshiva University for your child? If Yeshiva University is for your child, Harvard can't compete. If it doesn't work for your child, then there should be 10 or 12 schools out there that can accommodate them so they can get a great education, but also remain a Jew. We worked hard to make sure that that experience would be non-pareil. And it's hard for parents. The reason we're having issues now, the financial issues now, and by the way, you can look at most presidents of most private universities that don't have $20 billion endowments, and they'll tell you the same thing, is that a university in today's economy is not an economically viable model, and yeshiva is the mother of all non-economically viable models. We have one tuition which on the average is $8,000 to $15,000 less than any of our competitive schools, Boston University, George Washington, Columbia, Princeton, Brandeis, NYU, that much lower. Our student aid is discounted, tuition's discounted 50%. We give out $40 million a year in undergraduate financial aid, and that's because we have a very small niche market. 3,000 of our children graduate from modern and centrist Orthodox day schools and yeshivas every year. One whole cohort of our community is only 3,000. We get 650 of them, right? But there's a very small market. We have to offer 2 curricula, at least, on 2 separate campuses. There's no way it can work without supplementing that with different income-producing activities like YU Global, which we've announced. They all have to be of high quality, like a summer school that we've just run that hopefully will yield us about a net of $1 million and provide high-quality education, including 10 online courses, which fully half of the kids took. We also need to offer more meaningful master's degrees, because master's degrees make money. But you're never going to make money, and you're never going to break even at what our yeshiva is and what the undergraduate schools are. So you have a crisis. And it's a crisis that was exacerbated by the fact that we ran out of money. We had a liquidity crisis. We didn't have reporting sufficient so that we realized we were running out of cash. That created all the noise in the headlines. At this moment, thank God, we have a great team in place. We have a great plan in place that we call the Roadmap to Sustainable Excellence. We will have, by the time you look at 3 years at yeshiva, from the $230 million of the non-Einstein budget, we will have cut about 50 million. Of that 50 million, 7 is from academics. 7 is from academics. And I'll also tell you that when students come onto campus next year, a new student will see nothing different than they've seen in the past, because that's how hard we're working on it. I'll also say when we're done with this plan, which has another 2 years to run, and we've cut whatever we can cut and right-sized whatever we can right-size, there will still be a $20 million gap, because as our consultants tell us, you can't cut your way to sustainability. So at the end of all the proper cutting, you have to be mindful of the mission, and there's another $20 million that we're going to have to identify every year through increased fundraising, through more appeals in the young Israel of New Rochelle, through new products like summer schools and master's degrees and online courses. We now have fully online masters in Jewish education, which is available for all the world. We have an executive master's of business administration. We're starting a master's in marketing. We're looking to have health science masters and doctorates, all of which can be excellent and all of which will generate money. So that's our plan, and that's where we're going, and we're really focused on it laser-like. I'll do short questions, short answers too. And don't accept what I say, push me, because I actually know what I'm saying. Yes, sir?
You mentioned Einstein a moment ago.
Yeah.
I understand you're making some serious changes with your relationship to Einstein. Can you tell us why you're doing
Well, there are reasons why we should have done it, and there are reasons why we're doing it. We're doing it because Einstein runs a deficit of $100 million a year. And it runs that deficit because it is a major research institution that's getting a few $100 million in NIH money with no clinical money from a hospital to match the money that you get from the grants. When you get a grant, for every dollar you get, you have to raise between 30 and 40 cents. The overhead rates have gotten lower. The sequester has cost a lot of money. And generally, the only hospitals that can, the only medical schools that can be great research institutions like an Einstein are those that are either owned by or own a medical center. And Einstein, together with Harvard, is one of the few medical schools that does not own or is owned by a hospital. Harvard has billions of dollars in the medical school endowment to be able to cover that. We don't. Einstein was started in the 50s because Jews weren't getting accepted either as students at medical school or as professors at medical school. Now we compete with the best medical schools to get the best students to Einstein. And Einstein grew in meaningful ways. We had a choice. We could either cut down the amount of research that Einstein did, therefore making it into a more pedestrian school like some schools are, or you could say, what's the trajectory for Einstein? The trajectory, a parent isn't supposed to lock their kid in the closet once they grow up and get too big for the house. You're supposed to launch them to success. The way to launch them to success was to make sure that Montefiore, which needed Einstein as well, that Montefiore would share with us the responsibilities for Einstein and would take over the finances, meaning that they would spend their clinical money to support the research at Einstein. So what's going to happen in the next month and a half is we are together going to form a joint venture enterprise that will be called the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. It will be owned 51% by Montefiore, 49% by Yeshiva University. We will transfer the properties and the land of Einstein to this new entity, which will pick up all the debts on that land. In exchange for that, Einstein will assume financial control. Montefiore will assume financial control and will take with that the $100 million annual debt until they can get it down. Einstein continues to be an affiliate of Yeshiva University. Its degree is a Yeshiva University degree. We remain responsible for overseeing the academic quality for Einstein, and in perpetuity, Einstein will be kosher, will be Shomer Shabbos, will support the synagogue at Einstein, will act in accordance with Orthodox Jewish law, and will maintain a special relationship with Yeshiva University undergraduates, guaranteeing that a certain percentage of the entering class of Einstein will be graduates of Yeshiva University. It's the right thing. It's a win-win-win. If you didn't have the newspapers making it seem like somehow there's something terrible here, it's a great win-win-win. Einstein can be what it can be. Montefiore can continue to grow because it needs a medical school. Yeshiva continues to have the right kind of relationship with Einstein, and the Jews are happy. That will happen, and when that happens, all the rating agencies and the like will look at Yeshiva in a different way and say that $100 million is gone. You still have a $40 million annual deficit in the rest. How are you going to do it? And that we're doing by what I've said to you before. Sir?
Once you don't have a majority interest in Einstein, though, what prevents Montefiore from deciding they really don't need a Yeshiva University degree? They don't need all of the things you would like to continue for perpetuity?
Because the contract is dependent on, it's in the bylaws and it's in the contract done. This is la'olam va'ed, forever and ever, non-negotiable. And in the contract, even if we have a minority of seats on the board, part of the contract says that the board cannot change these details that we've signed on to. That's not my concern. As far as the Yeshiva University degree, if Einstein ever gets to a point where, like Mount Sinai, they can issue their own degree and they want to do it, as long as they remain an affiliate of Yeshiva, you know, I don't see that as a problem, but that will be at least 5 years in the future. Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell us a little bit about the YINR program and what kind of help is available for middle-class families who want to send their children to yeshiva?
I'll take the second part first. As I said to you, of $80 million in tuition fees undergraduate, $40 million is given away as scholarship. So the average student is not paying $38,000, they're paying $22,000. And in that $22,000, there are an array of loans and other special programs that are available. Now look, the truth is, it is not a public university, and I can't say to anybody that it's a free ride. But I have to be able to say to young people who want to study at yeshiva that you might have to bend, but you're not going to break. And so when people go that extra step and contact our advisors, our financial aid advisors, they repeatedly find that we're looking to make it work, and we make it work. 20% of our students pay full tuition. 80% of our students are on some type of financial aid, scholarship, and loan. And I think, look, it's killing us, but it's also very important to us and to our future. About the YINR program, YINR is the program for students that come in who are aspirational, but are lacking so far in Jewish skills. Professor Sober has sustained that program. For how many years you've been in that program?
1968.
Right. And now, in the last decade or so, it's really reinvented itself because there's a new kind of young person there who has very little Jewish background, who's been involved in NCSY or some type of youth group, who went to Israel and had a charismatic experience. And they come back, and in yeshiva as virtually the only place where they can have one-on-one experience. We're going to have about 100 men in that program, but they're also divided up by interest groups and by skill groups. And they have people of this quality who look to have relationships with these souls, because they don't only need the skills. Yeshiva can be very intimidating. There are all these kids who know each other from Israel, who've been learning in day school and yeshiva since they were 2 years old. And here come these kids in who are aspirational, but they don't feel welcomed with open arms.
20 countries are represented.
20 countries are represented by that YINR program. But through the faculty and through students who in fact open up, and through a great leadership that has Shabbatonim, Esther and I host the YINR students once a year for Shabbos. It's a wonderful experience. So I think it's a wonderful place. Now, by the way, some students stay in the YINR program through college. Some are there for a year and then transfer to another Jewish studies program and another Jewish studies program in yeshiva. But I'm very proud of what it is. So, and we can certainly be happy to get you more information and come visit. Any other questions? Ma'am.
Can you explain Dean Bacon's new role and what and how the void will be filled at CERN?
Okay, the question is, can I explain Dean Bacon's new role and how it will be, how the void will be filled at Stern? I'll explain what that is. By the way, we'll do this for another 8 minutes and then you'll all be free. One of the concerns I have is when you look at our undergraduate student body, it's about 2,500 students, not counting the ones who are studying on our program in Israel. And for that, because they're on 2 different campuses, we have to date had 2 completely separate faculties, with not counting Sims, by the way, which is a 3rd faculty of business, right? But 2 separate faculties with separate departments, with separate rules. And it doesn't make sense. And the numbers don't justify it. So as we have right-sized the faculty, and in fact made the student class size go, the average class size is going from 14 to 18, hardly dramatic. We wanted to say there has to be one faculty that over time will develop as much as possible one set of rules. For example, we have a unified history department now. That means that the faculty are looking together, working together, they're switching off if they're teaching at yeshiva or Stern, and we're getting much more bang for the buck. With the advent of technology and the possibility of having blended courses are, some of the course is online and students can take it whenever they want, but it's supplemented by specific periods on each campus when the student has access to their professor to talk about what they've learned online. The interesting thing is, faculty members are more than a little scared of it until they learn how to do it. Students love it because that's the language they've grown up in. So the hope is that over the next 2 to 3 years, we will develop a seamlessness in an undergraduate arts and science faculty, and there's no human being alive other than Karen Bacon who can really learn from both and have the patience to deal with the, the passion of our faculty members, and she can do that. As far as Void, Karen has a car, and she spends 2 days a week at Stern, 2 days a week at Yeshiva, and 1 day en route. And both Ethel Orlean remains a stronger associate dean at Stern, and Joanne Jacobson, a wonderful professor, is a strong associate dean at Yeshiva. Fred Sugarman is helping with that and with student affairs. And we're looking for all kinds of synergies, not just for savings. So that's how we're going to do it. It's so easy. Yes, sir.
So one of the variables you did not mention about the cost structure of the university is that the students, the undergraduate students, don't stay 4 years. Is there any plan to encourage students to perhaps stay more than 1.8 years?
I pray to God every night, but they don't stay 1.8 years. Since you were a student just a few years ago, there is now a 6-semester residency requirement. And Israel's not residency. So you have to be there 3 years. If you're in the honors programs, which are wonderful, you have to be there 4 years. And what's happened, because we really have a rich faculty, not in terms of money, that's all I need, the headline. Joel says faculty's rich. A deep and rich faculty. The number of students who are choosing to stay for a 4th year is now over 100. It's a small number, but it's over 100. I would love everybody to go to Israel for a year or 2. I don't know why I'm giving them credits. I know that if I stop giving them credits, I will have a collection of Rosh Yeshiva from Israel invading my home, first finding me liable to death, and then retrieving the punishment of stoning and doing it right then. So you can't. And I think you're right. I think even though a lot of other schools are trying to see how to have shorter schools, I think a 4-year undergraduate education is enriching to everybody. But I'm also not fighting it. So you can get out in 6 semesters. It is 128 credits. There are a few other things that are happening. Some people here have their children who've graduated from yeshiva, are staying on for another year to get a master's in accounting, because now, in order to get the CPA, you need a master's in accounting or 150 credits. So our master's in accounting program is growing, and it's really great because they can take the master's at the same time as either they can learn in the base medrash or start a job. So it's very interesting. Tonight I was just talking to a student who had to go to Night Seder to study on June'sman. There's a special period during June. And I said, who are you studying with? And he gave me the name of a guy. I said, I don't know him. He says, probably not. He goes to Penn, except in June, when he lives with me and he goes to the base medrash and we learn all day and at night in June'sman. I said, great. Do we have tuition for June'sman? And of course we don't, because that's also part of what yeshiva is. There's room for a toughie. What's that, too tough? Do you have a question? You're a member of the faculty. Don't you want to stand up and yell at me?
To what end? What happens? One, the programs in Israel don't always harmonize with YU. They promise their students in Israel one thing about us, and when they arrive, they find something else. Can something be done to ease that shift from an Israeli program into our program?
Yeah.
With realistic expectations?
There are multiple layers to your questions. I mean, number one, we now have a staff of people who are full-time in Israel, whose job is just to spend time with Israeli students in their different schools. We also have a group of undergraduates, men and women, called madrichim, who come from particular schools and twice a year visit Israel to those schools to start bonding with the students who are going to come back to yeshiva, and that helps. I'll also tell you, in recent years, the yeshivot in Israel have become much more YU friendly because it's also occurred to them that chances are, if they think being frum is so important, their best chance of this continuing is when they go to YU. Also, the flipping out phenomenon of several years ago is pretty gone. It's pretty gone now. I think there's still a culture shock. When you spend a year or two on a moshav or in a yeshiva where what you do all day is sit and learn and schmooze and learn. I'm not putting down the learning, but it's very much a narrowing experience, not a broadening experience. And then all of a sudden, you know, you come back to New York City and you come to a dual curriculum and you come to pressure, even when we make it very warm, it's different. But I have to say, I welcome that difference. It's their next step in life. The retreat of Israel is wonderful, but if they think that's their moment of nirvana and for the rest of their lives they're going down, that's a terrible thing. And it's not down when they're at yeshiva. They get to listen to Soloveitchik, so they know all about Yogi Berra. Last question? Professor Sober.
The morality issue.
I'm in favor of it.
Morality has raised its head in Riverdale and in other places and by us. What do we,
And you expect a raise asking me such questions?
My students hug me, they kiss, my Sephardi students kiss me. We are together all the time. We learn all the time. It's a very different kind of atmosphere. We have mashpia on them all the time. We show them you can be a karateist and also do Torah, etc. And what do we have in place? Are we over this? Is this past this? Are we still suffering from this?
Which this?
Financially or?
Which this?
This cases that these kids brought upon us.
You mean the high school cases?
Yeah, are we past?
We were over 25 years ago. I mean, look, part of my frustration is that when I taught at Cardozo, I was a professor of legal ethics. When I was running Hillel, a large agency, I was recruited by the OU, God help me, to run the investigation into the behavior of NCSY and Baruch Lanner. And I did that. When I came to yeshiva, the first and most important thing was to review all procedures to make sure that they would be gold standard, both in terms of safety and also in terms of integrity. I set a zero tolerance policy for cheating. Several students were expelled from yeshiva. You have to do that periodically, I think. Therefore, when pretty much out of the blue came this blast from the past of Yeshiva University High School, which I attended, and it had such a profound impact on me that I refused to go to Yeshiva University, but not for any nefarious reasons. It was a terrible thing that we had to address, but had to address fully and fairly, but also legitimately. I mean, there are major issues raised by that. MTA is a wonderful school today. It is an absolutely safe school today. It was in 2003 when I became president. I found it that way, but we made it better, right? I don't know what to do when somebody starts coming up with stories, many of them probably true, of a period 20 years earlier than that. I will say this to you though, there was no conspiracy at that Yeshiva University. There was no cover-up at that Yeshiva University. I would say shame on us for having an institution where that kind of lax situation could happen. We have apologized to anyone who might have been hurt. We have offered them lifetime counseling services for everything they can do. And we've also done the kind of tshuva gemura saying that if you look now at what we do, that is not what we do. Is it behind us? Unless the forward has its way. It is completely behind us. And thank God our numbers in our high schools are going up and up. I decry the forward and opportunistic things. That people were hurt or felt hurt, I think we have to be responsive to it. But it's very complicated because you also have to be responsible for the well-being of the people of your institution today as well. So I think that's behind us, but there's no scandal in the community that people don't want to see if YU has anything to do with. But the more important question, and you can vouch to this, our students believe in shleimut. They believe in integrity. They believe from beginning to end they're supposed to live a whole life and a full life. And the pieces have to fit. And there's no place for cynicism, and there's no place for a dual morality system. And there's a very conscious sense of responsibility to other Jews and to the whole world, and also to the state of Israel. And that's what I'm very proud of. And I hope you are too. So give us your most precious resources, your children and your grandchildren. Make sure that among your Maser gifts, let Yeshiva be in the top 5. And any of you who are mega million philanthropists, let's talk later. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you as well. And all the best to everybody, and enjoy your summer. Thank you for your graciousness.